Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, healing, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. I'm Rachel Grant, and I've been a sexual abuse recovery coach since 2007, and I'm the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at rachelgrantcoaching.com. Well, folks, today we are so blessed to have here with us Kalpa Gupta, who is going to be sharing with us about her journey of healing. And we're also going to get to really dig into such an important topic, which is how to identify, deal with, and heal from trauma in the workplace. We know that the experiences that we have in childhood impact so many areas of our lives. We often focus on, personal relationships, but gosh, those relationships we have at work and how we show up at work and all of that can be just so impacted. And Kalpa is the right person to be talking to us about this because she has founded her company, Next Group, which really helps people deeply connect and transform their lives and their businesses and rebuild relationships and speak from, a place that's really internally and externally authentic. Kalpa has done her work in her own journey of healing with, therapy and coaching and conversations with her husband and son and soul searching. So we are going to gain so much from Kalpa's wisdom today. Thank you so much for being here and being my guest.
Thank you, Rachel. And I must admit, I was also listening when we were planning for this podcast. I was following your work, and I'm so impressed by really your work that you've done in terms of helping survivors move past that, right? That surviving phase. And there's more in life. So I am super excited to also bring in that lens of personal trauma and then workplace toxicities or other biases that we see around in our world, how that impacts us.
Oh my gosh, so on it. Thank you for being a fan and being a follower and for your words of confirmation. I received that. And yeah, I've been doing this work since 2007. So it's been a little minute. And you too have been, on your journey. And I'd like to start there, kind of telling us a little bit about your background and your own experiences of trauma and just, yeah, how you've kind of gotten to where you are today.
Sure. So I would say my epiphany around all of this journey, I say, started with my path to motherhood, right? And shit hit the fan when I was also newly promoted as as a leader in a large global, Fortune 100 company, and I was also in the middle of a situation where I found my values were not aligned, and I was completely burnt out. And I realized that I was carrying a lot of my personal trauma in my life that I needed to heal, right? And I thought this was a thing of the past, as in my infertility journey, like many of, the people like, or in my relationships, the kind of people I attracted, I had done all of the work and, it was all a thing of the past, but no, the same feeling of, not being enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. And, almost like in Alice Miller's book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, she describes that achievement. So I feel like I was hiding behind achievement. So really the short story is I was sexually abused since 3-4 years old up until like 20 years, early 20. By different people, an uncle, a teacher, a cousin, and a few other uncles, and you name it, like 6-7 people. Like I probably lost count. And right now I'm saying it with a straight face, and trust me, you can get past that. I think it was more of it really made it hard for me to trust people, right? And trust. Sure. And the irony of it is, I always somehow managed to keep my inner child that always knew that I was more than that, like alive. And I find that my life is like a beautiful gift that I was able to save that, right? Because yeah. And so really back to your question then, in that context of me growing up in India, in a patriarchal society, which is very similar to US, honestly, right?
Yeah,
Or
we're not
globally.
really that far for long.
Exactly, like
We
in
like
terms
to
of
say we are, but I don't know about you.
right, US not ratifying the equal rights for women, like one of the 7 countries along with Iran and a few others. So we have a long way to go, just even though we lived in both of these democracies, right? And by the way, this is not just a women's issue. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys are abused before they are 18 in US, at least by published reports. In India, every 15 minutes a child is abused. In US, it's every 9 minutes. And these are not just stats, these are lives.
Nice.
Right? And I don't think it hit me in that sense, all of this data like that I've read or anything, until I had my own child. And I remember like holding and nursing him one day, and he must have been 2, 3. And I'm like, I looked at him, and this was around the same time that I had started experiencing abuse. And I was like, oh, if something were to happen to him, right? Or if he, like, would that be his fault? No way on earth. So,
No way.
why am I now, even though I thought this was a thing of the past, why am I feeling ashamed? Why am I feeling, unworthy? And why am I like feeling like I'm hiding constantly? I need to have this success and everything material, like for me to feel like, I got it, right? I have that
Yeah.
control back in life. So we can go many different ways from here, but that's basically the gist of where all of this healing essentially started, right?
Yeah.
It's not a thing of the past. I got to deal with it. And the only way I can change reality for my son is if I start speaking about it, start to confront and share with others. And really, I mean, I didn't want to believe that is it. Like, this can't be that, I need to get this life sentence. Oh, I was abused and I'm broken. And,
Oh my
I
gosh.
laugh.
You are so speaking my language, lady. I feel you on that so much. I mean, yeah, I think it's first of all this piece that you're touching on that I think is great for us to kind of bring forward, which is the ways in which those of us who experience trauma abuse often do lean on things like success, achievement, status as a way to say, look, everything is beautiful and bright and shiny over here. There, of course, is nothing like wrong going on. And that becomes such a trap in so many ways and very suffocating and keeps us away from really looking at the harm. We stay in that place of pretending and hiding. I can relate to that very much myself. Like, well, I'm doing great in school, so I must be fine, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then something happens. And for you, it was motherhood that said, we better take a closer look at that, right? For me, it was a divorce. I think there's always something somewhere along the way in every person's life that says, okay, that thing that you've been ignoring, we better take a closer look.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, it was motherhood. And also, I think the corporate, the workplace trauma, right? So,
Yeah.
and I say that in a broader umbrella of, the microaggressions, the biases, the adverse childhood experiences, the expanded ACEs beyond like the abuse, neglect, and family dysfunction, like bullying or, racism, right? All of these
it,
things
yeah.
that actually have a compounding effect, right? In terms of
Yes.
the lens through which an individual sees the situation, the broader context in which the organizations are designed, right? And then the society, that we are operating, and then our intergenerational, lens, right? So I'm going to focus on the workplace dynamics. Like I was the only, honestly, when I was a director, pretty much only a couple of women of color that I saw locally, like within the broader kind of context. And I was working in a large company. I remember going out at a leaders executive kind of meeting and just saying literally 10 and less than 10%, women, right? And so you're always trying to strike that conversation I remember one of the situations that actually I want to talk about where, and again, through the lens that this is not about any organization. This is how many
Yes. Yeah. It's
organizations are.
systemic. It's
It's a
broad.
systemic,
Yeah.
it's broad, right? So for things, and I also speak all of the stories through the lens of people that I've led, people of different demographics, Caucasian women, single mothers, or or rather parents versus women that are single,
Mm.
male, people of color. And I when I see how systemically we praise some people and we berate others for the same type of behavior, right?
Yeah.
They are in performance reviews, or when they are, or talking about, leaders are talking about, senior leaders, about who has more potential. um, there's a tendency to have like confirmation bias, right? Which is basically, you are seeing the world through your lens. And I'm an economist, a big fan of, all of the work that Daniel Kahneman did on, all of the think slow, think fast and slow, right? The book, right? It's all summarized.
Mhm.
So two things that I saw very often happen. One is the negativity bias. The other is the confirmation bias. And
Yeah.
negativity bias is more from an individual's perspective. Like I had experienced trauma, right, in my childhood. So the feeling of
Yep.
not being enough, not being worthy. So for example, when I was raising my hand for directors, there were 3 times. I think I got 2 rejections, and then the third one I got it. But then my first thing was, do I even deserve, like, why is this person again giving me the role if this person was already telling me I wasn't ready, at one point, right? Or
Yeah.
right. So it's, and then like going, but this had more to it. We also attract, as people that have experienced trauma, and if you haven't done the healing, the toxicity and the bullying and all of the things, right? So in my case, the energy which I was showing up was also like not speaking up, holding my voice,
Yeah.
not asking for things, or, and then whatever I would say, even when I had my courage to raise my
Yep.
voice, it was being seen as difficult, right?
Oh,
Or
exactly. Oh, she's so aggressive. She's so difficult. Yeah. Why shouldn't you just play by the rules? All
or
that
she can't
nonsense for this
communicate, my
women.
accent is such,
Yeah.
where I
So
wouldn't,
emotional. Did you ever
right?
get that one? Ah,
And back in the day, like today, if somebody says you can't communicate, I own my accent. Like I'm like, look, people, I speak 3 languages. I didn't start speaking until English, like until I was 16 years old,
I can give you this message in 3 ways. Let's
Right, I
go.
can deliver 3 ways. You have a problem, like I don't have a vocabulary problem, right? I would say that, but at the time, I wouldn't. And it's not like just here, if you take US, any context, cultural context, you would find it. But we are talking specifically, America and US, because US, let's face it, like systemically, we do have an influence globally on the, the world culture. So I think all of those lenses really made me feel at some point, and I was burnt out. So I was asking for support for building my team and extra resources, but I just wasn't receiving. And granted, everybody has to work through the limitations we have in organizational, cultures, right? Large companies. And if the workplace is not designed from trauma, same things can have really adverse impact on the people, right?
Yeah.
So I think I just went down a spiral, and I think after a few years, I left after working till 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh my gosh,
But
right?
that's a whole
Yeah.
nother
Yeah.
topic for another day.
Well, yeah, I think it's really important the ways, a couple of things that you touched on there. First of all, how like just the way that we show up in the space. Am I in my voice? Am I empowered? Do I show up with agency? Or am I in my trauma response? Am I in my child self or my victim self where I don't have voice, where I see everything, against me? And there are very real things that are against me, but when I am in my trauma response, it's disproportional. And so there's everything is against me, and I can't
Mhm.
get any perspective in that space. And then that gosh, what's the right word? It's like the over giving.
Compensation.
the lack of boundary, like all of that, right? Like you're the first one there, you're the last one home, like all of that, no work-life balance. And again, it's through that lens of like, I have to prove that I'm good enough. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is by, being here all hours of the day, etc.
Oh, you're speaking the same language. I say, you know, I wasn't giving me the grace that I was giving everybody, right?
Oh,
Like we
yeah.
overcompensate. We are like people pleasing. This is
Right.
again one of the tendencies, right?
Overcompensating.
Because you
Yeah.
as a child had to learn to tiptoe around people, like, people, even if, like in my case, when I shared with my family, and I didn't share, by the way, with my family, anybody until a few years ago, right? So it's a very
Mhm.
recent thing. So and in my case, they've been super supportive, including my husband, who's been, we've been married for nearly 17 years now. And my, my parents, and it was hard for my dad to hear. It was hard. I even shared with a lot of the family members, like about the people. And I've had conversations with abusers, but it was a relatively recent development where I shared with everybody. Um,
Mhm.
and it was response was very, positive in the sense from a support perspective. So I feel for people, where they carry those tendencies of
Yeah.
people pleasing, is because you probably shared it with somebody about your trauma and they didn't believe. So guess what happens? You come in a workplace in a healthy, if you had healthy development, right? Or healthy emotional kind of all of that maturity, or, you would have probably seeked out help, or if you had access, you would know, wait, this is not healthy. This is not how I should respond, right? But when you don't have those resources, or where you're not, that awareness isn't there, everything feels like a spiral that
Sure.
you get sucked into other people's drama. And sometimes it's not even your drama, somebody else. The part that I haven't touched so far, Rachel, is that, so if 1 in 4 adults have sexual abuse, have experience as a child, some of these people are also leaders. They're walking on eggshells
For
in the corporate hierarchy.
sure. Yes,
Right.
that's
So
right.
hypervigilance control, you think about how our workplaces, our nations, defense, everything is designed. People are trying to control other people to really
Mhm.
feel the safety.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good point. It's such a good point because company culture is really very often top down. There are some organizations out there that work more holistically, but oftentimes. And so if your leader is in that space of unhealed trauma or whatever it might be, then exactly that's going to impact and influence the way that everything is run, the communication, the expectations, the lens of it all. So man, you're making me think of a moment in my own life when I was working at a startup. And there was this moment where we were in a meeting and I had gone in, we had a shared spreadsheet, and I had gone in and I'd moved some columns, like just like moved a column over here because the tracking of like this data, like I want to see that data before this data. And you would have thought that I had killed this man's firstborn child. Up, like shit yelling, like raised voice yelling. And in that meeting, I stood up and I walked away. And I had to take a breath. This was like I could feel my own trauma response starting
Mhm.
from having been in an abusive marriage. And it was like pinging that for me. And I went to the bathroom and I chilled out. I got perspective, like, okay, let's go back, let's figure it out. And I'll never forget walking back into that meeting and then being pulled aside and being chastised for walking out. And it just has always stayed with me as the reality of when workplaces are not trauma informed. And also, absolutely, patriarchy, right? Like one behavior is acceptable. We look past it, we allow for it. And then when a woman does XYZ, no, 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 no. You cause emotional waves. That's what they said to me. I cause emotional waves. And so, how are we to, I mean, and that's just the dynamic of a woman, not love. Add in if you're a woman of color, if you're a woman with disabilities, if you're a woman who is trying to balance, parenting and all of these things, right? It gets so layered. How do we, as people who have experienced trauma, prepare ourselves and to be in the workplace? How can we support ourselves? What can we do? Um, I know there's another question there, but I won't ask a million questions all at once. We just start with that. Yeah.
So I share this from the lens, people can be at different points in their life, in their age, their, relationship, like all of it. If you are in your, post teenager, early, adult, and really entering the workforce, be aware of these patterns, essentially, right? Like that hypervigil, the fight, flight, and freeze response,
Mhm.
and fawn, and other, where you're really thinking about, you're re-triggered, thinking that this whole core wounds, as my therapist would say, right, are activated.
Yeah.
So you be aware as you're going in a workplace, and if somebody is talking to you in a way or doing something that is not okay. For example, ask the question, how would I respond if this were to happen to my best friend? Or how would I respond if this were to happen to, somebody who works for me in a team? Or, and usually women, like, that are trauma survivors, they are really caring for their team and going all the way, right? So fighting for other people. So think about that. And if that is not okay, it's not okay for you to tolerate that, right? So
Love
that's
that.
one. That's just more from a workplace, like knowing that you are an adult now. You're not that child who had no other options, and really who you were the victim. But really taking back the power, saying be present now, and it's harder said than done in that. And then the second thing I would say is really our I would say self-love in the broader umbrella, which to me, it starts with forgiving. And I know it's a hard place for many, right, to get to, but that just any way you can release emotions, whether you go to a therapist, whether you work with people like Rachel or me or others, whether you talk to a friend, do anything, but ask for support, right? You know that, remember the stats, and you are not alone. And then third, if you're in your life somewhere, I don't know, 30s, 40s or beyond, and just know that people are triggered at a couple of different points in their life. One is, as you are, of course, when you're having other, relationships, like you're attracting this, you're used to certain things, and in some weird ways, we are attracting the partners who are going to show us the same, hurt us again in a deeper way, right?
Yeah.
And you, as a parent, you might be again get triggered when you first started experiencing your abuse, or again when your children become that adolescent, or they go through that age, which is the reason a lot of the survivors, they're sharing their stories in their 50s. The average age that people share is like 52 or 53, right? Can you
Right.
imagine? Right.
Right. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
these are just some three high level things, and like really for somebody to get started being aware.
Well, I think that's really great advice. I think it's really wonderful. And I think a point that you made there that I really want to highlight is that, we are, um, company culture is very interesting because for a very long time, it was you go to work and that is a separate place, and you have kind of almost like this persona or this identity and this self, and like anything personal, you leave it at the door. Yeah. And there's this interesting way in which there is more of a shift. There's this book called like Emotions at Work, right? Like there's more, we're starting to see more of these conversations about like bringing in who you are, and I need a personal care day, and like really having a bit more transparency. And then, so the point that you made there, which is what's happening over here in our life and like our relationships in our family, it is going to come over into our workplace. We can't segregate these two things. But I also wonder, like, it's sometimes like, where is the balance, right? Because it feels like there's a little bit like the other trap that I think survivors of trauma can sometimes fall into is the oversharing. Yeah, it's like, oh, like I want to have this safe space where I can be authentic and like, man, I'm having a bad day. But there's this tricky, I mean, do you feel that way too? Like, what are your thoughts on that piece?
So a couple of things, right? So I almost challenge the age-old thing that, you kind of have to suffer in silence, essentially, right, for your lifetime. I think you and I are aligned on that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Just think about the world, like what thing is out there where nobody gets triggered? I challenge, right? So like there is hot coffee. Some people hold the hot coffee. You're asking for buying something at Starbucks and they have to write like, caution, it's hot. Come on, you ask for a hot coffee, right? So,
Mm.
I'm not saying in this case somebody asked to be re-traumatized. What I'm saying here is that part of the challenge is we people deal with their trauma in their private lives, and then they feel like, oh, that's it, and then you don't realize you're one whole being,
Yeah.
right? And that your emotions, your some things are going to be there. So being aware, it doesn't mean that I go to the details of exactly who did what, to me. There's certainly some boundaries, but it also means that as a healthy individual, healthy adults, and all of us get to work on it. I don't think most of us didn't have those healthy boundaries as children, right? It's
Yeah.
like knowing that there is that person, like it's their story, right? I am not in that story. We start seeing us in that story, right? Like, so for
Mm-hmm.
example,
Mm-hmm.
early on when I would share, if somebody else were to share, in my supports groups or, abuse, about childhood sexual abuse, I would cry. Like I would cry on my own. I would cry for them. These days, I'm holding the space because, I have done the work and I'm holding. And when somebody else is sharing, even in their 70s and 60s and so on, and trust me, I've had those conversations where
Yeah.
where I don't need to feel that pain. I can hold a space, right? But they just need to share. Now, in a workplace context, I think part of the problem, where the problem happens, where I clearly draw a line, is where you shouldn't force people to share, like in the name of team building activities, like, hey, vulnerability,
Yeah.
come and
Yeah.
you do need to make sure, when you are holding, and this has been my learning also, holding some events and speaking, that make sure that people are aware that there could be sensitive topics being discussed. And I've spoken in forums by now in front of over 200, executives, like mostly in
Mm.
financial services and women in that audience. And I will tell you, every time I do the survey, right, one in, almost half the room has experienced or knows somebody, right? So
Right.
people don't know, and it's a big release when they are able to see that others have experienced it. So by
Yes.
and large, I believe sharing is important to, like,
Mm.
it's a thing of the past. For me, it doesn't hold anything, any control over me. But if we don't share, right, we are just perpetuating that same silence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are certainly those examples where, oversharing, forcing people is not enough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
survivors, know that you always have a choice where you feel you should share or not. You do have that choice. Just remembering that you do need to, people need your permission, essentially, right?
I think it's great. Yeah. What I heard in there too that's important is thinking about the context and the purpose of the sharing. Why am I sharing it? And then the who am I sharing it with? Does this person have the capacity? Do I have a level of connection relationship such that that is going to be more not guaranteed, but a good chance that it won't be a high risk, thing that I do there. As we start to wrap up, which I'm like, what? I want to talk to you for like another 5 hours. What do you mean? So I'm looking forward to staying in touch and getting to share more of your resources. But maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you. And I know there are kind of these two prongs of your work as well. There's the work you're doing with people who have experienced trauma, and then there's work that you're doing with corporations, businesses. So give us a little 411 about that.
Sure. So, I always joke, I love variety. So I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur, if you will. Like I just couldn't fit in a box, right? So the part of me, who I am, I'm really a connector, and I love talking to people. I love writing, I love speaking, and I love singing, right? So that's like my jam, right? Yeah. And I love travel and learning. So in the business line, I have 3 lines of businesses, if you will. One is the corporate consulting, given where I come from, like where I have spent most of my time. And it is also centered around really the premise that women need more money. So consulting, I do want to show up. I've been in financial services for nearly like 20 years since I started my career. So I do consulting on that space, and it's really around both product strategy as well as more trust, building trust essentially, which is really how, as I have evolved, bringing in that lens within the companies, right? The second is the one-on-one coaching essentially. And this is, I will clarify that I am not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. If you need therapy or counseling, you do need to go to somebody, like, Rachel, who's done a ton of work, or there are other, therapists in your area. You can find out. I am a business and a career person, a coach who is informed, who's gone through, lived this journey,
Yes.
and who can speak the language, who can see some patterns that we display in our workplace. And I have integrated all aspects of those things, because I was feeling very disconnected. So I can help you with that to go after your dreams and not hold you back, like that you are not enough, the same story, right? Like in terms of asking for more money, creating your dream business. So that's the one-on-one coaching side. And then the third is speaking. Rachel, like I want to do a TED talk. I want to speak, like my vision is that, I'm 43 now, right? And when I read that stats on like 53, years old is when people share. My mom is, and she's a survivor, right? She hadn't shared that story until I shared with her in her 60s. So I kind of thought about, in a hindsight, like what would the quality of my life be if I knew that my mom had experienced abuse? When I shared with my family, almost half of the people have experienced abuse, childhood sexual abuse. So as I heal, I am damn breaking that cycle, not in just my own household, but like this entire,
yes, lady, I love
everywhere, like, and I have worked in like so many brands, right? GE, Amex, Bristol Myers Squibb, you name it. And when I connect with my colleagues, and I have known them from years, and they are dealing with things in silence, right? They are not able to, for whatever reason, come forward and share, and that's okay. That's their choice. But just know that the part of you are just, still holds you guilty in some way. So you feel that you won't be accepted, if you come forward. And I can see that why, right? And I hope that, the reason I speak is that for the use of my voice for all of these people.
Right on. I love that. Okay, I can't wait to see your TED Talk. And I love that you are supporting people in chasing their dreams and understanding how to move that trauma out of their way so they can get there. Oh my gosh, it's been just such a joy to have you. Final word, what do you want our listeners to most know?
I want them to know they are perfect exactly the way they are, and they are not alone. Hear me? Like, and you are not alone, you're perfect. And you can, you can change your reality. Just reach out to somebody. If people didn't believe you, it's not your fault. There are 8 billion people on this planet. Hope you reach out. If you have nobody, like, hopefully you're hearing this message, reach out to Rachel or me. We can point you to resources, but reach out to someone. I simply want you to know that your life is a gift, and please reach out to someone.
Kalpa, on that beautiful note, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. I look forward to seeing your journey continue to unfold and staying in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining us today. As always, you can pop over to rachelgrantcoaching.com to learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching and explore the resources on the site. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and then come back next time, because we have so much more to share. And until then, take good care of you.